Oral questions by members.
Member Richmond Queensborough.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At a time when small businesses are at the most vulnerable, the Minister of Labour is choosing to make it more difficult for job creators. The business community is pleading with this government, and I quote, "Surely you can appreciate the harm Bill 23 poses through the imposition of additional long-term costs to employers as they continue to cope with difficult operating decisions, reopening challenges, and other considerations surrounding whether they will survive." End quote. To the Labour Minister, will you stop being dismissive of small businesses and listen to their serious concerns?
Minister of Labour.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Let me say this. Injured workers in this province have not seen any improvement in benefits through WCB in the last 20 years. They have come to almost every MLA's office, and they have made it clear to all of us, time and again, that the system is not fair, it's not working for them. Their families have contacted our offices, that the system is letting them down. So, Mr. Speaker, we are taking small steps in improving their benefits and modernizing the WCB system. At the same time, ensuring that the employer's premium will not raise. I think that is a prudent approach, that is a balanced approach, that is the right approach. That's why we're taking it.
Member Richmond Queensborough on a supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is also about survival of these very businesses. These employees, these people have to have jobs to go back to. That's what we're talking about here. Just 3 weeks ago, I remind this minister how he mishandled the layoff policy and he had to do a U-turn. I remind him of that. The minister talks about consulting. He did that yesterday. The problem is he doesn't listen. That's the problem here. Only 16% of BC businesses have any confidence in this government in helping them succeed. I have the survey right in front of me, Mr. Speaker. It's done by the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade, the BC Chamber of Commerce, and the Business Council of BC. 16%, not even 1 out of 5 people, or sorry, 1 out of 5 businesses feel that this government is working for them, Mr. Speaker. I have here a quote from the Home Builders Association. They sent in a letter to this government saying, quote, "Many businesses are not in a position to pay back the many taxes and fees that have been deferred, let alone bear any new costs," end quote. Will this minister finally listen to hardworking small business owners and press the pause button?
Minister of Labour.
Mr. Speaker, let me remind this member as well. Who are the workers that we are talking about? These are our frontline workers. They are risking their health and their families so that they could go there and take care of our loved ones and provide care to those who are sick with COVID-19. And what the opposition is saying, we expect you to go and care for our loved ones, but God forbid if you are in contact with COVID-19, you're on your own. That is a wrong approach, Mr. Speaker. We're going to stand with those workers. We're going to provide them the support that they need during the toughest time that they're going through. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we are not raising premiums for the employers. It's a right approach. It's a balanced approach.
Member Langley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, to listen to the member, you'd think that the concerns being raised are somehow being raised by nameless, faceless corporations. And that's just not the case. We're talking about family businesses. They aren't sure if they're going to even survive through the pandemic. One of those is Western Pacific Enterprises. It employs 1,000 British Columbians. And Mr. Speaker, this is a family business. It's a family business that's grown into one of Western Canada's largest electrical contractors. President David Fettback says, quote, "I am writing to express severe and significant concerns, and I ask you to protect all the workers and employers of BC from this undue risk and not make the contemplated changes as proposed," end quote. Will the Labour Minister finally listen to employers like David and their significant concerns?
Minister of Labour.
Mr. Speaker, when COVID-19 hit us unexpectedly, our government acted very quickly to provide support to the businesses, because many of them, the members said, we haven't. $5 billion package was brought in by our Minister of Finance, $5 billion. Out of that, $1.8 billion for businesses. $700 million in property tax break, permanent break, Mr. C, for the whole year. $700 million, that's one of the largest tax break in the history of this province for the businesses. Wake up, member. We have been working with businesses, Mr. Speaker. We are listening to them. That's why all of the other benefits for the employers, support for the employers, defer taxes, cut taxes. Mr. Speaker, when you take a look, in addition to what I've said, we have worked very hard with the federal government to make sure that they get 75% wage subsidy. We allow restaurants to purchase alcohol at wholesale prices, saving them 25%. We provide $10 million in grants to tourism organizations to support marketing campaigns for summer. Mr. Speaker, on top of that, WCB have also allowed employers to defer their premiums for 6 months and waive premiums for certain other employers. And Mr. Speaker, they will continue to enjoy subsidized rates. So, Mr. Speaker, the government has done so much for the businesses. We understand we need to do more. $1.5 billion also set aside for reopening our economy. We work with the businesses. We care about businesses, but at the same time, we are not going to ignore health and safety and the rights of the workers. That is a balanced approach. That's why we're taking it.
Member Langley on a supplemental.
Well, just as with the issue around the temporary layoffs and the questioning and the answers that the minister gave at that time, his answers today show he doesn't understand the concerns that businesses are raising. He clearly doesn't. David is particularly concerned with making COVID-19 a Schedule I presumption. And here's a place where the minister might want to listen to some of the consultations, because 92% of submissions on that issue have been from employers who don't support the measure. And here's what David writes, quote, "This statutory intervention signals your support for a manifestly flawed policy measure that has no scientific or medical evidence to support it. This is unacceptable," end quote. This is not the opposition making up concerns from business. These are real people with real family businesses who may not be able to stay in business. And minister, what that means is they may not be able to continue to employ these people. They need their jobs. Will the minister relent? Finally, don't wait as long as you did for the last issue, and pull this. Listen to these people.
Minister of Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I have a letter from the employers groups Monday, and I have another letter from representatives of the workers. There are over 2 million workers working today to keep our economy going. The representatives of the workers are saying this, on the other hand. Employers said that they are concerned about their cost. We recognize that. We understand that. That's why we are bringing the package. That's why we're bringing the package that is very modest. We are not proceeding with the recommendations that came with Mr. Parr. Had we gone ahead with Mr. Parr's recommendation, it certainly would have cost employer money. $700 million it will have cost to the WCB Accident Fund. We didn't proceed with that. We are proceeding with the recommendations that will not raise employers' premium, Mr. Speaker. And here is what the other side is saying. Here's what the other side is saying. 2002, BC Liberal government brought in changes that continue to have profound and devastating impact on benefits to the injured workers and their families. And that resulted in 13% loss of benefits to the injured workers. 2002 to 2005, they're saying, rehab budget was slashed by 98% and has never recovered to pre-2002 levels. Mr. Speaker, they're also saying at the same time the subsidy to the employer continue on, and between 2007 and 2018, it valued at $1.8 billion. So they're saying, Mr. Speaker, while Bill 23 make meaningful improvement for injured workers and their families, there's much more work to be done. Bill 23 represents an initial set of revisions that only begin to repair the damage done by the previous government. Mr. Speaker, we as a government has a responsibility to balance the two opposing interests here. And that's why we're bringing in a package that is modest, that is measured, and it will not raise premium for the employers. In the meantime, it will provide health and safety protection for the workers and give them support when they are injured or they need support from the WorkSafe BC.
Leader, third party.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's important to get on the record that the $5 billion that was approved by every member of this House. It was a multi-partisan effort to ensure the people of British Columbia were supported during this COVID-19 crisis. Mr. Speaker, this government has promised to bring in reforms to the Forest and Range Practices Act that governs how forestry is done in British Columbia. The regulations and legislation that govern forestry in BC are entirely focused on maximizing timber supply. Values like biodiversity, water quality, and wildlife can all be managed for, yes, but only without unduly reducing the supply of timber. This fundamentally undermines our ability to manage forests and our forestry industry sustainably. Reforms are absolutely essential to begin to shift our management regime away from an exclusive focus on timber supply to the detriment of all other values and towards sustainable management of our forests for all the values they hold. Yet, so far, the government won't bring them in. My question through you, Honourable Speaker, is to the Minister of Forest, Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. Will he introduce the necessary changes to the Forest and Range Practices Act by this fall session to begin the shift towards more sustainable management in our forests?
Minister of Forest, Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the interim leader of the third party for the question. I'm happy to discuss our plans around forestry reform. We're committed to reforming the forest sector, and that's to improve public trust in how we sustainably manage forests, public trust that was damaged under the previous government. And we're committed to ensuring that the publicly held natural resource, the forests, benefit first and foremost communities and workers. We've taken policy, regulation, and legislative actions in the 3 years we've been in government. We've created fiber recovery zones so that less waste is left on the forest floor after harvesting. We've focused on increasing value over volume out of the forest with our mass timber initiatives. And we've ensured that forest stewardship plans must be updated at minimum every 5 years. We've also embarked on 5 forest landscape planning pilot projects around the province. So, Honourable Speaker, we are committed to introducing more positive changes, including legislation, as a government, and as the unpredictable events such as created by COVID-19 permit.
Leader, third party on a supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for the response. Working around the edges is not enough on this. Forestry in BC is broken and it needs fundamental reform. Over the past number of decades, we've seen the loss of tens of thousands of forestry jobs, as well as the continued liquidation of some of our most pristine, highly productive old forests. Yet this government is delaying bringing in the basic preliminary reforms to legislation to start us down a better path. We've spent this past week asking the government what steps it's taking to reform the industry, protect old growth, and support workers and communities to transition. While the minister has acknowledged some of the problems before us, nothing has changed on the ground, and we don't see a plan for the future. In fact, a friend recently recounted to me that he has personally witnessed recently old growth being, quote, hammered on our coast. The longer that this government delays on changing course, the worse the outcomes in our forest and forestry-dependent communities are. So once again, my question through you, Honourable Speaker, is to the Minister of Forest, Lands and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. We've heard lots of words in the last couple of days. I'm looking for just one. Will his government pause logging in old growth ecosystems at the highest risk until a plan is in place? Yes or no?
Minister of Forests, Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And once again, I'm happy to answer questions around the management of the forest resource in the province. And our government is absolutely committed, Honourable Speaker, to implementing a new, sustainable and comprehensive old growth management strategy. That's why we commissioned the Old Growth Strategic Review, and the panel toured the province and provided a very comprehensive report. As I said in my response to the member's question on this topic on Monday, we've committed to release publicly that report within 6 months of receiving it. We received it at the beginning of May, and we're on track to meet that commitment. As for any actions that will arise as a result of the report, it's important to remember that the terms of reference clearly outline that we will engage in a government-to-government consultation with First Nations before setting policy direction in response to the report. That's in the spirit of respect, and acting unilaterally without first conducting that government-to-government discussions would not be respectful. Thank you.
Member Prince George Valemount.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Well, to use the Labour Minister's own language, the person that needs to wake up is the Minister of Labour. He touts his work with businesses, and yet that's resulted in another 9-page document where businesses express significant concerns. And that's the second time in mere weeks he has been called out. The minister just doesn't get it. Workers need jobs, and this bill means thousands of jobs are potentially at risk. Yesterday, the Labour Minister even called the significant concerns expressed by businesses across British Columbia an ideological bloc, once again being dismissive. Those representing the hardest hit sectors in our economy have also signed the letter. The Retail Council, Restaurants Canada, the BC Hotel Association, and the Tourism Association of BC. And in fact, here's what the Tourism Association said just yesterday, and I quote, "More than 90% of the tourism businesses won't make a profit this year. We are at the edge of the cliff," end quote. The tourism sector has been devastated. They are desperate. So maybe the tourism minister will stand up today, stand up for the sector she's supposed to represent, and ensure that her government does no more harm. So to the tourism minister, will she stand up and tell her colleague about the devastation this bill could cause her sector?
Minister of Labour.
Mr. Speaker, as I said before, we are very, very concerned about the economic situation that we're all going through. It's a worldwide pandemic. It is hitting us all. And we are doing everything that we can to listen to businesses, work with them. There is a Premier's Economic Recovery Task Force. Those issues are discussed there. How do we help them to restart the economy? And Mr. Speaker, I think we should be proud in this province, due to the leadership of Dr. Bonnie Henry, leadership of our health minister, our premier, that we're listening. And we are then moving ahead to help the businesses to restart the economy. And that help is there. And Mr. Speaker, I must say, that's why our package that we have brought in is very modest. It will not increase cost of the premium of the employers. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, it will improve workers' health and safety. Protecting workers' health and safety should be everyone's concern here. We should all support that. Mr. Speaker, when they are injured or become sick at workplace, they need support. and we must provide them with that support. The system that we have is 20-year-old, isn't working for the workers right now. So that's why those changes are being recommended, and I know the BC Liberals have ideological block, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the workers' rights in this province. Their track record is clear. Their track record is clear. You don't help workers, Mr. Speaker, while ripping up their collective agreements. You don't help the workers in this province, Mr. Speaker, by eliminating the benefits for the injured workers. We are going to support the workers. At the same time, we're going to work with the employers so that their cost isn't increased. That is the right thing to do. That's why we're doing it.
Members, before we move on to the supplementary question by the member from Prince George Valemount, did anyone find that her talking was overridden by background noise? Because it is, we perhaps can offer the member another question as well. Okay, thank you. Member Prince George Valemount on a supplemental.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Well, you know, it's one thing. It's pretty rich for the minister to stand up and talk about seeking advice and input. It's a completely different thing to actually listen to it. In fact, this minister has a track record as well. He simply ignores the concerns that are expressed by businesses and job creators across the province. So let's look at the numbers. 100,000 full-time and part-time jobs have already been lost in the tourism sector alone, and they're warning that a further 120,000 jobs are at risk. It demonstrates just how fragile the economic situation is for the tourism sector. And that is why the Tourism Association signed the letter that says, and I quote, and perhaps the minister will want to listen to this part, Bill 23 will add significant costs. It is ill-timed, ill-considered, and ignores broad-based and repeated requests from the business community to do no harm, end quote. Again, to the tourism minister, will she stand up and tell the Labour minister that Bill 23 will add significant costs for the tourism sector, and now is not the time to add costs and put thousands of more jobs at risk?
Minister of Labour.
Mr. Speaker, the background noise kind of really, helped me get up and answer, because it seems like there's some saw going on in the back. There's sawmill working, some people working. But let me say this, Mr. Speaker. There are groups, there are two sides to this. There are workers, there are employers. Both have opposing interests. One side is saying, both have taken, Mr. Speaker, both have taken different position on Bill 23. Both are taking different position. Workers' representatives are saying that Bill 23 doesn't go far enough. That the damage of last 20 years isn't going to be fixed by Bill 23. We need to do more. Businesses, of course, on the other side are saying that they are concerned with their cost. That's why we as a government are taking responsible, balanced approach. Make sure that the businesses' cost isn't increased. At the same time, improve the health and safety and the concerns of the workers at the same, Mr. Speaker. That's why what we are doing, we're doing. Let me read you a statement, Mr. Speaker. 2002? Let me read you. It says here, our continued ask has been to help business reduce red tape and administrative burdens. Today's changes are on the pathway to achieving reduced administrative burden to help employer and employees. More need to be done, but this is a good start. This comes from the second largest Board of Trade in the province, Surrey Board of Trade.
Member Abbotsford West.
Honourable Speaker, I think we just heard the adversarial nature that is characterizing the minister and the government's approach to this important matter. The cards and letters continue to flow in today from the British Columbia Construction Association, who write, quote, now is not the time to introduce measures that increase costs, add to the regulatory burden, or create further uncertainty for BC employers. And it's not, Mr. Speaker, just added costs. Because you see, the minister and the government also want to impose new rules regarding directors' personal liability that is going to make it even more difficult for small nonprofits and community service agencies to retain and recruit the directors that they need. Who was asking for that change? Who on earth was asking for that change, and why, Mr. Speaker, does the minister think that the ideal time to introduce a new element of uncertainty by dealing with an issue that, quite frankly, nobody knew was a problem, and doing that in the middle of the worst recession in living memory?
Minister of Labour.
Mr. Speaker, thank you to the member. That provision existed in the Employment Standard Act right now. That provision existed in CRA, Mr. Speaker. It is enabling WorkSafe BC to collect unpaid premiums by very few employers who don't do that. It is to create a level playing field, and I think they would agree with that. There are employers who pay their bills on timely basis. They obey the rules, but there are few who don't. WorkSafe BC requires certain additional tools so that they collect those unpaid premiums by giving them these extra tools. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about some of the other changes that we are talking about. Allowing WorkSafe BC to provide preventative medical treatment, which could save the whole system money. Mr. Speaker, providing such health care to a first responder, for example, on a timely basis could help claim that would end up being more severe for the injured worker, more costly for the worker compensation system. This meaningful change is good for the whole workers' compensation system. All of those recommendations that we are talking about came through 4 different reports that we commissioned. They consulted widely, came back with the recommendations by Mr. Parr. He combined all those recommendations in his consultation, came back with the recommendations. But understanding the tough times, the challenging times that the business and economy is going through right now, we did not proceed with the costly recommendation that they recommended. That's why we went with only those that will not increase the cost to the employers, but at the same time have meaningful support for the workers when they need it, and enhance their health and safety. That's what the purpose is behind this bill, Mr. Speaker. It is the right approach, and it is the prudent approach, Mr. Speaker.
Member Abbotsford West.
Well, that's not what community service organizations think. Let's say I am one of those organizations in Langley or Prince George or Cranbrook or Surrey, for that matter, Mr. Speaker. I need volunteers to help guide my organization. It's already tough because in the midst of the recession, people are worried about whether their business is going to survive, they're worried about their job, they're worried about the safety of their family. And now I have to tell a prospective director that the minister and the government have decided to create new legal tools that will impose an additional personal liability that will allow WorkSafe to come after them personally if there is an issue involving WorkSafe for that community service organization. Well, what does the minister think the answer is going to be from these people? And how do you think community service organizations are going to fill those directorships with people confronted by that additional challenge? Again, I asked him, who asked for this? Who asked for this? What is the urgency? And what is the minister's argument for imposing this additional uncertainty in the midst of the worst recession in living memory?
Minister of Labour.
Mr. Speaker, it came through consultation. I did not. It came through consultation. The recommendations, Mr. Speaker, And now, you see when truth hit them, how they react, because they're not used to it. Mr. Speaker, workers on this province have not seen improvement for 20 years. Mr. Speaker, that's why we are taking small steps to promote and enhance their health and safety at workplaces, because a healthy workplace is a productive workplace. And we all want all workers to go to work, come home safe and healthy at the end of their shift, Mr. Speaker. That's the goal. That's why we're making these small steps at a tough time, at the same time supporting the employer, the businesses, by not raising their premiums. Mr. Speaker, it's a balanced approach, and I know every time we talk about improving workers' health and safety, giving additional benefit to the workers, they howl that the sky is going to fall, Mr. Speaker. But that's their track record. We're not going there. We are going to support the economy and the employer and the workers and their health and safety. That is the right thing to do. It's expected of the government to do, and workers of this province expect us to do it. So that's why we're doing it, because it's the right thing to do.
The bill ends question period.